Today I'd like to talk about the Potluck Album. I first got a copy of this album around about 1980, I guess, and at the time you could still get a lot of the 1977 reissues in the shops in the UK. However, you couldn't get a copy of Potluck. It had been deleted for quite some time. I ended up buying a German copy, and I've always really liked this album. This copy that I've got here is actually an original Japanese pressing from 1962. It's a stereo one, and it has the usual Japanese back cover with the lyrics in English at the bottom and the Japanese album title and song titles at the top. There was a mono version as well, but the stereo version is much more popular. Mono was pretty much on the way out in Japan by 1962. The album title in Japanese is actually different from the English title. It was originally called Wagatomo Elvis, which is at the top here in Japanese, and that means our friend Elvis. And it still had the same title in 1969 when it came out on RCA, but when they reissued it in 1973, they changed the title to Potluck, which of course is just potluck using Japanese sounds. They actually have a long English education in Japan. They start learning English from elementary school and right through middle school and high school and even into university, the first year of university. So they're very familiar with a lot of English words, even though they can't really speak English very well. And that's why often with Japanese album song titles, they use English words, but using Japanese phonetics. So there is an example on this album, it's Night Rider. In Japanese it's called Naito Rider. And even if I just look around this room, there are so many things that are basically the same in Japanese as they are in English. So for example, cover, they use the word jacketto, and record is a recordo, turntable is a turntable, poster is a poster, door is a door. So there are hundreds of English words that are used every day in Japanese using Japanese sounds. So that's why you get a lot of song titles that are basically the same as they are in English. However, there are a couple of interesting song titles on this album in Japanese. The first one is Kiss Me Quick. So originally Kiss Me Quick was Hayaku Kisu Shite in Japanese, which is a Japanese translation of Kiss Me Quick. However, the single was known as Kiss Me Quicker. Now the single came out in 1964, of course, 2 years after the album. So whoever translated the song title for the single either changed their mind or it was a different person to the one who translated it on the album. And this is quite an interesting single. I've got a couple of copies of that, which I'll talk about very soon. Just to go back to the album titles, another one that I like on here is Something Blue. So Something Blue has a Japanese title, Nantonaku Yuutsuda, and that means a bit depressing in English, which I think is a great song title. Another one that's not so good is I Feel That I've Known You Forever, and that one translates back into English as I'll Never Forget You, which is not quite the same nuance as the English title. Okay, so let's move on to the singles and EP related to this album. I actually have two copies of this single, and they are slightly different, and I'll just explain what those differences are. So the first one, going back to May 1964, had a couple of problems with the cover, and this actually was re-released recently, I think in Europe, on a coloured vinyl if I remember correctly, and they actually used this cover here. And as I say, there were a couple of problems with this cover. The first thing is they actually managed to spell Elvis's name wrong. It says Elvis Presley with two R's. And another problem on the back side, which has the lyrics as usual, they managed to spell the title of the B-side, Suspicion, incorrectly. It actually says, down here where the lyrics are, it actually says Suspicton. So there's a T where there should be an I. And they've actually got the title correct at the top here, that's alright. This is another copy of Kiss Me Quick and Suspicion. And what they did was they actually corrected the error. They actually have Elvis's name spelled correctly on this one. And also Suspicion is spelled correctly as well. Funnily enough, the misspelling of suspicion, is actually also on the back cover of the LP.
Nuts. Absolutely nuts.
So they managed to fix those two errors, and what they also did, they actually changed the title of the song, Suspicion, in Japanese. It's going to be difficult to explain this, but if you look at the yellow characters here, and I'll put some pictures up later just so you can see it more clearly. The yellow lettering here is the title of the song Suspicion in Japanese, and it actually says Utagai on the left one, the first issue, and that's obviously Suspicion in Japanese. But on the one on the right it reads Suspicion, which is obviously the English word. And on the album, on the Potluck album here, it uses the same one as the first single with the Japanese word. And that stayed the same until 1973, and then they changed it to Suspicion on the album as well. And it's always been known as Suspicion since then. Although they changed the title of the B-side on the insert here, they didn't change it on the record labels. So the record label is still Utagai, the Japanese title. So you have a situation here where the title on the insert is actually different to the title on the label. In 1965, one of these songs from Potluck appeared on a single and also in the movie Tickle Me. And that was Easy Question, and this is the Japanese copy of Easy Question. It actually has It Feels So Right as the A-side and Easy Question as the B-side. And they actually used the title of It Feels So Right for the title of the movie. Another song which came out on a single was I'm Yours, and this is the Japanese copy of I'm Yours, using the promotional picture from Tickle Me. They also used a couple of Potluck tracks for the EP, Tickle Me, and this is the Japanese version of the EP. You can see it uses the same image as the single, except it has red letters and not blue. This is interesting for a couple of reasons. It's actually in true stereo and it sounds really good. The UK EPs that I have are in mono, and I'm not sure about the American version, but this one is definitely in true stereo. It sounds really good. And there's another interesting thing about this. It's to do with the tiny little text there, and I'll put a picture on screen so you can see this. Whereas on the single it says from the picture Tickle Me, they've got the same wording here, but what's happened is the LE from tickle has fallen down. I guess it must have happened during the printing process. So it actually reads something like from the picture tick me or. So there you go, that's the 1962 version of Potluck from Japan, with a few related singles and the EP. By this time, the sound on Japanese records was pretty good. I would say it's up there with the American and British versions. Not necessarily better, but certainly comparable, I'd say. Well, that's it for today. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And as ever, thanks for watching and take care. Cheers.